We're talking with the fastest growing aviation YouTuber here on this episode of In the Hangar. Welcome to In the Hangar. I'm Bailey Ward.
I'm Dan Milliken.
And I'm Christy Schaefer here on this special edition of In the Hangar brought to you by Flying Eyes at the Flying Eyes booth at Oshkosh.
So Flying Eyes, you can use our code, taking off all caps, one word, here or at the website at flyingeyesoptics.com. And also Clemens Insurance. Jerry knows how to ask the right questions to get you the lowest rate. He saved me like $1,100.
Thank you to our sponsors for helping bring us to Oshkosh this year.
Yeah, and one of my things I've looked forward to the most was meeting Hoover from Pilot Debrief. Hoover, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks so much. I'm glad to be here.
No, Hoover, you are like the coolest guy ever. I've been watching your videos. I've been watching your videos now for a minute because I like them. And just meeting you in person, wow. What a guy.
Well, thanks so much.
Yeah, I think one of the big highlights so far for me for this AirVenture has been meeting you and spending time with you and getting to know you more, because I do really enjoy your channel. And it's blown me away of how fast you've been growing. So it's almost like you came out of nowhere. But let's go back to the very beginning and how you got started in aviation.
Okay, so I'll try to keep it short, but it started when I was a kid. Like I lived in Florida, and I was outside on the elementary school ground when I saw the Challenger explode.
Oh.
That was one of my very first core memories of aviation. And growing up, I wanted to be an astronaut. And, but coming from a family that struggled financially, we didn't know how I was going to go to college. And eventually I found a way to, I'm going to go to the Air Force Academy, and that's how I'm going to get college taken care of. And then that kind of got me on the aviation path and off to pilot training with the Air Force. So that's really where it all started. But then it's just been a whirlwind after that between, flying with the Air Force and then transitioning out to now flying airlines.
What did you fly in the Air Force?
So I flew the F-15E. That was my first
Cool.
assignment out of pilot training. I did that for a few years, and then did an exchange program with the Marine Corps, flying the F-18 for 3 years.
Wow.
And then right back to the Strike Eagle. And then, they've got to throw in some non-flying jobs for breadth of experience, the standard stuff that the military says you need to make you a better person, right? And then, and then I wrapped up my career flying the Strike Eagle.
I will say my first impression watching your channel was that this guy was really, really young, and there's no way he's already served in the military, let alone you were career. You did 20.
Yeah, 20 years.
Yep, 20 years.
That just you don't look old enough to have done that. So
you got out of the military, and now you fly for a major airline.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
I got out, and it was a challenging time. And originally, I wanted to stay in the military and just keep flying fighter jets, because
who wouldn't?
Yeah, right?
Exactly. I mean,
Me too.
It's the best thing in the world to do, and but I obviously have to grow up at some point. And so let's go ahead and for the sake of the family, and I've got 3 kids, and they were starting to get a little bit older and into middle school. Okay, let's go ahead and transition out. Let's retire. And it was initially a difficult time because it was right when COVID happened. And so the airline kind of put the hiring, on pause. And then that got me venturing into the private charter world. So I ended up doing some private charter flying for a Part 135 company for about 9 months, while I was waiting for
your class
airlines.
date for the airline was in April of 2020, right?
It was April 6th.
Supposed to be.
April 6th of 2020 was when I was
That did
supposed to
not
start,
happen.
and we got an email 2 weeks prior saying don't bother showing up.
Oh man,
It was more polite than that, but that was the gist of it. And it was a hard time for everybody.
Yeah, and Christy, that was you actually 1 week later you would have had the same email.
No, seriously,
Right.
if I got the last class date at Envoy
In March.
In March of 2020. So I started, and then I started systems training. So they were like, hey, we'll keep you. Everybody else after me, they got to stay home, basically. They were not able to come in and do training. So I feel that.
Yeah.
So, Hoover, I'm interested. With your background in military and airlines, what made you want to start your Pilot Debrief?
One of the things that got me started in the aviation content was I knew I wanted to make aviation-related videos, and I started dabbling in YouTube before I began the aviation channel to kind of get a little bit of experience. But I kind of, I kept listening to my father-in-law, honestly. He kept asking me a lot of questions about things that were happening, something that he saw on the news. And I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to explain it to him, like, let me just explain it to everybody.
Put it in a video,
Yeah.
and then that way send him the link.
Right.
He can
There
watch
you
it
go.
over and over.
And so what I did was, my last job in the Air Force was the Wing Chief of Safety, so overseeing not only aviation safety, but occupational health safety as well as weapons safety. And it gave me some insight into accident analysis and, mishap investigations, that sort of thing. And then I started reading the NTSB side of the reports, right? Because the way the military handles accident investigations is slightly different than the way the NTSB and the FAA do. And I'd read through that report, and then you see the probable causes. Well, the aircraft stalled because the pilot exceeded the critical angle of attack. Okay, we got that, but why?
Right.
There's more to this story. And that's what kind of struck me as like, well, there's a story that needs to be told here. And then I discovered, well, the NTSB has this docket that has all of the, the background parts of the investigation and the witness interviews and everything else. Okay, well, how can I take all of that and then use what I know from my background in the military, especially being a fighter pilot, and the debrief concept that we applied in the fighter community and apply that to aviation? And that's kind of where the channel went.
Wow. Well, I love that personally, because as a newer pilot, I guess I should say, or at least not as experienced as you guys, that's something that is huge for me, not only as just general information, but as a resource. How can I be a better, safer pilot, and watching your videos and things like that helps break it down that step farther, from a pilot's perspective.
Well, Dan and I, one of the things that we share in common, one of the few things, is we are fascinated with air crash investigations.
Yeah.
And the reason being is not because we have this morbid sense of whatever, but because we are genuinely curious to know what happened and why, so that we could learn from it and hopefully prevent that. The one reason why I just love watching your videos is you have such a way of breaking it down eloquently. You talk about the factors, you talk about the human factors involved. You do it so eloquently and respectfully. And honestly, that's why I love watching your channel. And I think anybody here would say the same thing.
Well, I appreciate that. It means a lot to me. And that's, I told my wife from very early on that every video I make, I know somebody's going to end up seeing it that may be personally related, to someone that suffered that tragedy. And I wouldn't want to be that family member watching somebody else making a video unless it was respectful and it was focused on what lessons can we take away from this. And again, when you go back to the fighter pilot debrief, the whole point of that debrief isn't to break down the individual. It's to figure out what went wrong and why it went wrong, so we can learn from that and move on and make them a better person, a better pilot.
You can break down the issue without breaking down the individual.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And
Which brings up something that I noticed when I watched a video of yours. There was a video in which it was a general aviation incident, and you got something wrong in it. And you got a lot of flack, and that's how I mentioned to somebody, oh, you need to check out Hoover's channel, Pilot Debrief, and they said, oh, that's the guy that said something wrong about general aviation. So I went to that video and I watched it, and I noticed in the comments that you took a really humble approach, like you debriefed yourself, and in the comments you said, okay, guys, you're right, I got that wrong. So I was impressed that you owned it, and the humility that you approached it is the same way, you debriefed yourself.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I know exactly which video you're talking about. And that's the thing. I have a background in accident investigation and safety, right, from the military. I don't have an extensive 20-year history of flying general aviation.
Right.
And so my experience with general aviation has largely been limited to the reports that I read from the accidents, and then also, the transition into the commercial side of things with the private charter and now the Part 121 flying for the airlines. And so every now and then I get things wrong. And
Right.
and that's
We all
one of those things, though, like you said, from growing up in the fighter pilot community, it's like, okay, we'll take ownership of that mistake. I think some people might have just pulled down the video or just ignored it, but it's like,
Or
no,
delete the comments.
Yeah. Or no, this is an opportunity for me, and I don't like it, but you know what, like, I'm just going to own up to it and say, okay, this is something that I got wrong, and it's just because I didn't have as thorough of an understanding of general aviation at that time. And that's one of the things I'm very cognizant of with all the videos that I make now is I want to make it as factual and accurate as possible because I know so many people are going to watch it. But ultimately, I'm still going to make mistakes.
Well,
Yeah.
what's next? What's next for Pilot Debrief? Just status quo, continue on, or do you have anything else that you're going to be incorporating?
Right now, like I'm mainly focused on the channel and just continuing to try to deliver consistent quality content that I know people will be able to benefit from as I hope to reach a larger audience and inspire people into the aviation community, inspire the next generation of aviators. But the other thing I'm starting to work on now is some sort of safety related course that would be available for pilots as well.
Oh, wow.
Looking forward to that.
So that's because that's something that I know a lot of people have reached out to me about, and so that's something I've just got to find the time to manage it all is the challenge.
All the time we all have.
Well, on the drive-in today, we all got talking, and there was a tragedy, and I don't want to necessarily talk about that crash. Each one of us as pilots, we've had experiences where we hyper-focused on a situation and allowed something else to now become a problem.
Right.
So, maybe coming into AirVenture, you get hyper-focused on looking for traffic, you might forget stall speed or something like that. Let's talk about that issue about being hyper-focused.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we had a very candid conversation earlier. There was not really an incident, but I had an instance where even me, when I was flying somewhat recently, I got hyper-focused on one thing. I got hyper-focused on trying to avoid wake turbulence of a heavier jet in front of me. And, and I realized, fortunately, that I was becoming too hyper-focused and I had to refocus it. But, there was a lot that went into it, there's human factors that go into these situations. I was tired, I'd been up, it was long day, third leg, kind of thing. When you get to those stages of like flight time and fatigue and everything else, it's easier to get hyper-focused. We don't know what happened in this particular instance here at Oshkosh, unfortunately, not yet. But it's so easy for people to just jump on. I mean, I saw comments on social media last night where, there's just a lot of speculation, and it's really hard not to want to jump on that, but you realize
Right.
There is a human factors. I think the way that we put it earlier today was there's a human factors component. You need to realize that it takes about 10 seconds for people to understand and know what's going on, but sometimes you don't have 10 seconds.
Right.
So
Well, let me ask you, Hoover, what's the solution for a pilot being hyper-focused? What can a pilot out there take away that'll make them better in this situation?
So you guys keep using the word hyper-focus, and the phrase that the military likes to use is channelized attention and task saturation.
Ooh, that's fancy.
Ooh, I like that.
Channelized attention.
Channelized attention. So, and especially like in the fighter pilot community, like you get into a middle of a complex, large-scale exercise. You're monitoring 3 radios at the same time, trying to, fight an air-to-air threat while coordinating, attack.
That?
You get into that environment, and it becomes very easy to just get overwhelmed by everything. That all of a sudden now your attention, all you can do is focus on one thing, because everything around you, you're just getting oversaturated by stuff, So.
What's the answer?
The answer, I think, is really just experience, and then recognizing the threat and talking about, okay, well, I'm going to fly into Oshkosh. And this has nothing to do with what happened yesterday.
Right.
I just want to be clear about that. But I just use it as an example because I did make a video about Oshkosh, and that was the point that I wanted to drive home was, if somebody's flying in here and it's their first time flying in here and they don't have a lot of experience flying in a dense traffic environment where you're actually not making radio calls.
It's overwhelming.
The controller, exactly. It can become overwhelming. And now you kind of sometimes forget the basics of flying the aircraft because you're trying to take in everything else that's going on at the same time. So having an awareness of it, briefing what you're about to do and recognizing the threat allows you to develop some risk mitigation strategies to deal with that.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's huge personally for somebody at my level because it can be really easy to get bogged down on just the scenery, like what's going on in the cockpit, and that's something that's well, if you don't know it by hand, obviously external factors are just going to add that cherry on the top, right? So minimizing those is just huge, and like you said, experience. That's something that I personally have been focusing on. Of course, yes, I want to go further in my ratings, but how can I be better where I'm at right now? And mitigating that risk management factor is kind of like a huge thing that I'm focusing on.
Well,
right now.
I think the best thing that pilots can do is for every flight that you're about to do, identify what's the largest threat
Yes.
for
Right.
that
Yep.
flight. And
You took my words,
As soon,
yep.
as soon as you identify that threat, you've now taken the steps that you need to, okay, well, how am I going to mitigate that threat? And you can even do that during different phases of flight, too. Okay, I'm about to do the approach. What are my threats on this approach? Well, maybe they give me a different runway, or maybe, I have to do a go-around,
Right.
or
So
whatever.
something to
Anticipate,
consider,
not
yeah,
react.
as
Right.
you're getting ahead of the airplane, things like
Yeah.
that.
Okay. I've got one last question. Hoover, as your view count is astronomical on your channel. So you've got a really fast-growing fan base. What is something that your fans don't know about you?
Ooh,
On
I
the
like
spot.
this one.
Oh, okay. Something fans don't know about me. I think, I think they already know I'm probably pretty driven because I'm trying to do the
You're-
YouTube and
Oh,
stuff
yeah.
like that. But I think one thing that most people don't know about me that they might realize when they see me is I have an Ironman tattoo because
Yeah.
I've done an Ironman triathlon.
I think that was
so,
the first thing I noticed.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's one thing that I'm still kind of semi-active in that world, and would like to be more active. But right now, just the aviation is taking a bigger piece of it. But that's my kind of little side hobby is triathlons.
So he's a
Awesome.
fighter pilot and an Ironman and a YouTuber.
You're
Jack of all
basically a
trades.
superhero.
All right. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you, Hoover, for coming on.
Thank you.
And don't forget our sponsors. In addition to the ones we talked about earlier, 67 Designs, the best camera tablet mounts out there, 67D.com. Z-Vision, the brightest landing and taxi lights out there. We've got Colton Mortgage, Colton Taking Off, MPSprotects.com, Marshall Protective Services. And we really appreciate you guys.
All right, you guys,
Yeah.
like, subscribe, share. We'll see you all next time.
In the hangar.